CBS. This is a CBS News special report. Here's CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
A woman fired a shot at President Ford in San Francisco this afternoon, but a policeman deflected the pistol and the president was not hit. The woman was in a crowd across the street about 35 or 40 feet away as the president was leaving the St. Francis Hotel to enter his limousine to return to Washington. Witnesses heard the sound and saw a puff of smoke. The woman, identified by police as Sara Jean Moore, in her 40s, was immediately seized. When the shot was fired, the president was shoved into his car and whisked to the airport, where Air Force One was waiting to fly him to Washington. He was not hurt, and at the airport appeared calm and unperturbed. Now, with more details in San Francisco, here's our White House correspondent, Bob Schieffer.
Here we go. Good evening. To bring you up to date on what has happened here, President Ford is now en route back to Washington aboard Air Force One. He was not injured this afternoon, but someone did take a shot at him as he emerged from the St. Francis Hotel in downtown San Francisco. Mr. Ford was hustled into his limousine and taken directly to the airport. The plane took off about a half hour or so ago from San Francisco and is now en route back to Washington. A 40-year-old woman who has been identified as Sara Moore of San Francisco has been arrested by police. Police Sergeant Jim Wynn says she fired a shot with a .38 pistol at Mr. Ford, standing about 40 feet from him, but she missed. Here is some film of the incident. This film taken just after the shot rang out in downtown San Francisco, and as you can see, Secret Service agents and police are moving in. There is a lot of confusion now. No one is really sure, as this film is being taken, just what has happened. Witnesses said the president seemed to double over after the shot was fired. Someone at first thought that he had been hit. Then it appeared he was just taking protective action, and the Secret Service was pushing him on into his car. Press Secretary Ron Nesson later confirmed that Mr. Ford had not been injured. So that's official. Mr. Ford was not hurt during this incident. The police at first said a man had been arrested, and in fact several people were taken into custody. Police apparently just arrested suspicious people as they saw them right after this happened. But Police Sergeant Jim Wynn said he saw Sara Moore, the 40-year-old woman, fire the shot with what appeared to be a .38 caliber pistol. One of the witnesses who saw it and heard it said it was not an expensive weapon from the sound of it. It was just a cheap one. CBS News correspondent Richard Threlkeld, who for the last year or so has been covering the Patty Hearst story out here on the West Coast, knows Sara Moore, came to know her during coverage of that trial. Richard, tell us about it.
Well, Bob, it's strange how sometimes news stories become very personal stories and how, oddly enough, one big story tends to run into another, but it certainly happened in this case. This reporter's known Sara Jane Moore, who police have identified as the woman accused of firing that pistol, known her for more than a year and a half. She is a nice, quiet, 40-year-old middle-class white divorcee with a small child who lives in San Francisco's East Bay near Berkeley, leading a nice, quiet, middle-class life until one day in March of 1974 when Patty Hearst had been kidnapped and Randolph Hearst started the People in Need program, a $2 million effort to feed poor people to answer the ransom demands of the Symbionese Liberation Army. Sara Jane Moore walked into the Hearst Corporation offices off the street and volunteered to help. Over time, she struck up a close relationship with Mr. and Mrs. Hearst, Patty's ex-fiancé Stephen Weed, acting as a kind of liaison with the various minority groups who made up the coalition administering People in Need. She was bookkeeper and public relations lady, which is how many of the press got to know her, and spent many a weekend with her child at the Hearst Mansion in Hillsborough, joining that long vigil with the family, waiting for phone calls and messages from the kidnappers. When Patty Hearst renounced her family and joined the SLA, the People in Need program ended, and Sara Jane Moore took some odd jobs, but the whole experience had changed her life. She'd seen the other people, she'd been around the street, talked to people she'd never known before, various social classes, minorities, about things she'd never talked about before with anyone. Later on, she took to spending a lot of time in various Berkeley coffee houses talking to young people. Later on, I saw her at a demonstration outside one of the hotels. I think it was during President Rockefeller's, Vice President Rockefeller's visit. She was with one of the local prison aid groups. I haven't seen her in some months. She's called me a few times, and I haven't had a chance to talk to her because you get busy, and thinking about it now, I wish very much I had talked to her about it.
Dick, in the time that you knew her and would talk to her during that story, did you ever get any indication at all that she was a person of a violent turn, that something like this might come about?
Absolutely not. She was. She is the total antithesis of that. She's quiet. She tends to get very committed to things, to talk about things a great deal, very open mind to new ideas. But even during the times that she had joined various groups and started talking with people on the left, she was really not talking with what you'd call very radical, terrorist radical SLA people. And it was more, I think, in her mind. You had never any indication that what she was thinking would be translated into action. She's not that kind of person, or it didn't seem so.
What a bizarre development this is. Just less than 3 weeks ago, President Ford, threat made on his life by a person closely connected with the Manson case, one of the big stories, and now a person involved in the big story, the Hearst case. Well, that's it, and repeating once again, President Ford was not hurt. He is all right en route back to Washington. The woman is under arrest and is being questioned here in San Francisco. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, San Francisco.
Yes, it was just 17 days ago in Sacramento that a young woman pointed a pistol at President Ford from just an arm's length away, but that weapon did not fire. And then in St. Louis 10 days ago, police spotted but did not catch a man with a pistol in the building where President Ford was to speak just a little later. Now today, a shot was fired at President Ford in San Francisco. But, as we have reported, it did not hit the president. He is safe and on his way to Washington tonight. CBS News will broadcast a special report on the assassination attempt at 11:30 tonight, Eastern Time.
This has been a CBS News special report. This is CBS.